I want to tell you about the night my life changed, and it started with a sound I almost ignored. I was sitting in my cabin on Hearthstone 4, a frontier colony world where humanity had settled about 30 years before I arrived. I was 62 years old, retired from terraforming, and living alone at the edge of the settlement. My wife had passed 6 years earlier, my daughter longer than that. I had a stone cabin, a stack of old books, and a wood-burning fireplace that every other colonist thought was ridiculous. They all used plasma heaters, clean, efficient, modern. But I grew up on Earth, and my father taught me that a real fire has a soul that no machine can copy. So I built my hearth with my own hands, and I kept it burning every night through the long winter. The long winter on Hearthstone 4 lasts 9 months. Temperatures drop so far below freezing that exposed skin will go numb in seconds. Nothing survives outside without shelter. Nothing. That is why, when I heard scratching at my door during the worst blizzard of the season, I assumed it was one of the stray colony dogs looking for warmth. I set my book down, crossed the room, and pulled the door open against the howling wind. It was not a dog. She was barely the size of a large cat. A Cathari hatchling. If you have never seen one, imagine a small dragon with translucent wings and scales that are supposed to glow from within, like embers in a dying fire. But her glow was almost gone. Frost had crusted over her tiny wings. Her eyes were half closed. Her whole body was trembling so hard that the ice on her back was cracking with each shiver. She was dying. Now, I need you to understand something. The Cathari are the indigenous species of this planet. They are ancient, proud, and enormous when fully grown. They breathe superheated plasma, they carve their homes inside mountains, and they do not trust humans. Diplomatic relations between our species were polite at best and frozen at worst. Taking a Cathari child into my home could have been seen as kidnapping. It could have started a war. I picked her up and carried her inside. I did not think about politics. I did not think about consequences. I looked at a dying child on my doorstep in a blizzard, and I did what any decent person would do. I brought her to the fire. I set her down on the warm hearthstones and added 2 more logs until the flames were roaring. She uncurled slowly, pressing her belly against the heated stone, and I watched her fading glow pulse once, twice, and then hold steady. It was faint, but it was there. She was alive. I sat with her all night. I did not sleep. I just watched the fire and watched her breathe. You see, I buried my own child under alien soil 11 years ago. A terraforming accident. She was 23. I was not going to watch another child die on my doorstep. I do not care what species she was. She left at dawn. I opened the door, and she slipped out into the pale morning light, her small wings catching the cold air as she glided away toward the Cathari Mountains in the distance. I watched her go, and told myself that was the end of it. She had warmed up. She had survived the night. She would go home to her people, and that would be that. That night, the scratching came again. I opened the door, and there she was. Same spot, same trembling, same nearly extinguished glow. I let her in. She went straight to the fireplace, curled against the stones, and fell asleep within minutes. This happened the next night too, and the night after that, and every single night for 2 weeks straight. I started calling her Ember. After the first week, I tried to follow her at dawn. I bundled myself in thermal gear and tracked her flight path toward the Cathari mountain holds. She flew weakly, clumsily, like a bird that had never been taught properly. I watched her circle the entrance to one of the mountain caverns 3 times. She never went in. She just circled, hovered, and then flew away to a shallow cave about half a mile from the entrance. She roosted there alone during the day, pressed against cold rock, her glow dimming hour by hour, until night came, and she flew back to me. She was not going home. She had no home to go to. I started researching. The colony database had limited information on Cathari biology, but enough. I learned what they ate, what temperatures they needed, what minerals supported their internal fire. I began leaving food out for her each evening. Heated broth, warmed mineral stones I shaped in my workshop. She ate cautiously at first, watching me with those enormous amber eyes, ready to bolt at any sudden movement, but each night she relaxed a little more. By the third week, she was arriving before sunset. She would scratch at the door and chirp, a sound like a tiny bell being struck inside a furnace. I would let her in, and she would go to her spot by the fire. One night, while I was reading, she crawled off the hearthstones and climbed into my lap. She was warm for the first time since I had known her. Not fire warm, just alive warm. She pressed her head against my chest and made a sound like a cat purring, if cats were made of copper and starlight. I put my hand on her back and felt her scales rise and fall with her breathing, and I thought about something I had been trying not to think about. She never asked me for anything. She just wanted to be near the fire. I told myself it was the heat she needed. But I am old enough to know the difference between warmth and being warm. The answer to why she was alone came to me on a frozen morning in the 8th week, and it broke something inside me that I thought was already broken. A Cathari elder came to my cabin. His name was Sorthan. He was enormous, scarred across his jaw and chest, and his scales radiated a deep crimson heat that I could feel from 10 feet away. He landed in my yard and the snow melted in a perfect circle around him. I stepped outside prepared for a confrontation. I had rehearsed what I would say. I had arguments ready about mercy, about decency, about the basic rights of a child regardless of species. He did not ask for Ember back. He told me the truth instead, and I wish he had not. Cathari hatchlings are born with something called a bonding flame. During incubation, the mother shares her internal fire with the egg, and when the hatchling emerges, that shared flame becomes the foundation of everything: identity, warmth, family, belonging. It is how Cathari recognize each other. It is how they feel connected. It is, in every way that matters, what makes them alive to one another. Ember's mother died during the hatching. The bonding flame was never completed. To the Cathari, Ember was what they called a cold-born, a hatchling with no inner fire, no bond, no family tether. She was not abused. She was not exiled or punished. It was worse than that. She was invisible. No Cathari could feel her. She radiated no warmth to their senses. When they looked at her, they saw her body, but they could not sense her presence the way they sensed every other living member of their species. To them, she was like a shadow that happened to move. She essentially did not exist. Ember slept by my fireplace every night because it was the only warmth that did not reject her. The fire did not look at her and find her lacking. The fire did not sense her and feel nothing. The fire simply burned, and she could press herself against it and pretend, for a few hours each night, that she belonged to something, that she was not alone. Sorthan told me, in a voice as flat and steady as a stone wall, that there was no Cathari solution. A cold-born had never survived to adulthood in their recorded history. Without the bonding flame, her body would slowly lose its ability to generate heat. She would grow colder by degrees, day after day, until she simply stopped. He expected it would happen before the long winter ended. He said it like a weather report. She will grow cold and stop. I looked at this ancient, powerful being, a creature that could melt starship hulls with his breath, a being that had lived for centuries and seen things I could not imagine. And I felt something rise up in me that I had not felt in a long time. Not anger exactly. Something quieter than anger, but much more stubborn. A child is not a diagnosis. After Sorthan left, I sat by the fire with Ember in my lap, and I made a decision. I did not have plasma breath. I did not have a bonding flame. I did not have centuries of ancient knowledge, or the biological tools that her species possessed, but I had a fireplace. I had 30 years of engineering experience, and I had the particular kind of human stubbornness that refuses to let a child die quietly, just because someone ancient and powerful says it is inevitable. I did not sleep for 4 days. I tore apart my fireplace and rebuilt it from the foundation up. Using my old terraforming tools and everything I could find in the colony xenobiology archives, I designed a thermal cradle built into the hearthstone. It was a radiant heat chamber, calibrated to produce the exact temperature wavelength of a Cathari bonding flame. I could not create real fire the way a mother dragon could, but I could build something close, something warm enough and steady enough and constant enough that maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. I called in favors. Other colonists came, engineers, doctors, a xenobiologist named Priya, who had studied Cathari physiology for her doctoral work. Not one of them asked me why. They walked into my cabin, saw a tiny dragon child curled by a dying fire, and they simply helped. That is what humans do. We see a child in need, and we get to work. On the fifth night, the cradle was finished. I guided Ember into it. She stepped onto the warm stones cautiously, sniffing the air, her amber eyes reflecting the soft glow of the calibrated heat. She circled once, twice, and then lay down. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, her glow pulsed. Not the faint, fragile flicker I had grown used to. A real pulse. Strong. Rhythmic. Like a heartbeat. She made a sound I had never heard from her before. A low, resonant hum that vibrated through the stones of my cabin, through the floor, through my boots, and up into my chest. It was the bonding frequency. I knew it from the archives. It was the sound a hatchling makes when the bonding flame takes hold. She was not bonding to a dragon. She was bonding to the hearth, to the warmth I had built for her, to me. I sat down on the floor next to the cradle, and I cried for the first time in 11 years. Not from sadness, from something I do not have a word for, something between relief and wonder, and the overwhelming, terrifying weight of being needed by something small and precious. Sorthon came back 3 days later. He felt her before he reached my door. For the first time in her life, Ember radiated. He stood in my doorway and stared at her with an expression I could not read. Then he looked at me. "This is not possible," he said. "You have no flame." "No," I told him, "but I had a fireplace and a reason to keep it lit." He did not say anything for a long time. Then he left. Word spread slowly through both communities. The Cathari could not explain it within their own understanding of how their biology worked. A cold-born had bonded, not to a dragon, but to a human's hearth. It challenged everything they believed about themselves, and slowly, carefully, with the cautious curiosity of a species confronting something genuinely new, Cathari began visiting the human settlement. Not with diplomacy, with questions. They wanted to understand the species that looked at an impossible child and said, "No, she lives." Ember grew fast after the bonding. She stayed with me. She outgrew the cradle within a month. She outgrew the hearth within 3. By the end of the long winter, she was the size of a large horse, draped across my living room floor, with her tail curled around my reading chair, glowing so brightly that I did not need lamps anymore. She could have left. She could have joined the Cathari in their mountain holds, and they would have welcomed her now. She chose to stay. She still sleeps by the fireplace, not because she needs to anymore, because she wants to. The galaxy is full of species that are stronger than us, older than us, wiser and more powerful than us in ways we can barely comprehend. The Cathari can melt mountains, other species fold space, or remember the birth of stars, or think in dimensions we cannot perceive. But none of them would have opened that door in the blizzard. That is not pride. It is not a boast. It is just what we are. We are the species that builds a fire and leaves the door unlocked. We are the ones who find a cold, forgotten, impossible child on our doorstep, and say the most human thing there is to say. "Come in, sit by the fire. You are home now." That is all I did. That is all any of us ever have to do. I kept the fire lit.